Pittsburgh. It's an old school party. It's time to get real. Real situations and real solutions. It's time for relationship conversations with Dr. Linda Bing. Inspiring healthy communication, building strong connections, and helping you grow in love, one conversation at a time. Right here on Pittsburgh's DSEN, each Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Here's Dr. Linda Bing.
Hey, family, it's Monday night, so it's time for Relationship Conversations. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining me here on Pittsburgh's DSEN. I hope you had a great weekend and it's been the start of a good week for you, given that today is Monday. Mondays can be a little tough for some people. It's kind of, after being off on the weekend, for those who don't work weekends, getting back into gear can sometimes be a challenge. But again, you can always show up here on Monday night and just kind of breathe and let it all out. Anything special going on in your romantic life, please call or text and let me know. Tonight, what we're going to talk about is the whole idea of marriage. I've been noticing a lot that different generations, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, have a totally different outlook when it comes to how do you date, what relationships are like, and whether or not they choose to get married. So it just made me wonder, is romance dying? Now, I can tell you in my household, it is not. My husband did a very nice thing for me Friday night in terms of we we ordered some Italian food from one of our favorite Italian restaurants, but he told me to chill for a minute and he set a nice table with tablecloth and candles and dimmed the lights and played the music, and we just sat there and ate dinner Friday night. No reason at all, just being close. So it was good. And you have to do those things in marriage. But it makes me wonder, is romance dying? And in fact, is marriage dying? Maybe a better question is really to take a look at what is happening to the state of relationships today. So that's one of the topics tonight on Relationship Conversations. The popularity of marriage may be declining with some generations. So we're going to begin by talking about how different generations view dating, because that will help determine whether or not they believe in marriage. And we can see whether or not marriage is dying. So as always, share your thoughts. You can call me at 412-213-8995, or feel free to text. Maybe you're not in a place where you're free to talk or you just don't want your voice on the air. That's cool. I get it. Text me at 412-218-3888. So the two generations that I want to talk about tonight, one is Gen Z, and those are people who were born between 1997 and 2012. So they are like 14 to 29. So we're talking about the older end of Gen Z. And I want to talk about Gen X. Those are people that were born between 1965 and 1980. So again, they would be between 46 and 61 years of age. Anybody that's 30 to 45 is a millennial. They're not the focus of this discussion, but a lot of the things that we say could apply to them as well. So Gen Z and Gen X have strikingly different relationship blueprints. And a lot of it is due to the fact that Gen X grew up as latchkey kids. Remember that? Latchkey kids. You would get home from school, mom and dad were still at work. There was nobody to let you in. So you were in charge of yourself for a couple of hours. Now, some people may have gone to a relative's home or a friend's home, but a lot of children who are now Gen X, as they were growing up, they got home, they let themselves in, which is where the latchkey comes from, let themselves in. They usually made a phone call to let the parents know they made it home safely, had a snack, did their homework, watched TV, whatever, until mom and dad came home. So people who grew up in that generation tend to be a little more self-sufficient, and they have some different thoughts about roles, gender roles, etc. So we'll talk about some of that. But then you have, by comparison, Gen Z. And many people describe them as being digital first. They are the babies that grew up with technology. They're the ones that, yeah, they don't even know. They've never heard of a typewriter. It's like everything that can be done on a computer is done in their handheld phone now. So they're used to technology. They are also a generation that is more mental health conscious. They don't really mind talking about their situation, their problems, their issues, and they don't mind going to counseling. But when you look at, say, Gen X or baby boomers, there is a difference. So the digital first kids, very different. Even when it comes to the health stuff, they are used to using things like telehealth more than other generations are. So they're comfortable with this kind of no touch type of a world. And because they are most comfortable with therapy and therapists and no touch, they're good at setting boundaries and protecting those boundaries. So all of this really does influence what relationships mean to them. So let's get into talking a little bit about the key differences in relationship approaches, because it really does make a difference. Now, I told you that Gen Z, those are people up to the age of 29, from 14 to 29. And then we're talking Gen X, which is 46 to 61. So think about where you fall. Are you a millennial, in the middle? Are you a Gen X? Are you a baby boomer? Think about your children. Think about friends, family, other people, so that you can, as I'm going through and describing certain things, you can see, does it apply? Does it seem to make sense for the people that I know who fit into that particular age category? And as always, if you have a question or a comment, maybe your observation is different than what I'm describing, by all means, feel free to call or text. Okay, so let's look at some of the key differences. So if we're talking about things like intentionality or values, Gen Z is more selective. 90% of them prefer to make sure that they are aligned on things like money, politics, core values. They want to know all of that before they even go on a first date. So even though they might be meeting someone online, because again, they're digital first, they're more accustomed to meeting people on social media or a dating app, they do a lot more of that than they do going out and meeting people at different social functions. So they make sure that they're asking all the right questions to find out, what are your views, and do we line up? Do we match one another? Many of them are saying no to going out on dates if there's no alignment. And so I guess, that's good to a large extent, because they get to understand how their potential partner thinks, and they learn about their values. So they're not wasting time on somebody who is so far left that they just can't really get along with them. If there's no alignment, there's no point in dating. And so they're setting boundaries. You have to fit in this box. One of the things that is similar to, for me, is that one of the things that I do, I'm a certified relationship specialist. And so in becoming certified and in talking about relationships and doing relationship counseling and those kinds of things, I've developed something called a compatibility checklist. Now, I guess that shows my age. I did a checklist as opposed to it being something that's automated, but with AI, I'll probably get it onto an app. So looking at those things, I do give people categories. Write down within certain categories what your position is. Write down things like something light, like hobbies. So what are the things that you like to do? Write those down. What are your beliefs about education? Do you have to be with somebody that's college degreed, or does it matter to you? Those kinds of things are important, because down the road you'll see yourself bumping heads with your significant other. So getting aligned on that checklist is now the equivalent of what people are doing today on a lot of the dating apps. You want to get all of your questions answered, or as many as possible, so you can see whether or not this person would be a good match for you. Now compare that to Gen X, and only 6% of Gen Xers considered those early stage priorities. Many of them talked about they didn't spend the time getting to know someone up front, because again, remember, Gen X people were not meeting folks on dating apps and social media. They would meet people out at a restaurant, a bar, the gym, different things like that. So through conversation, they would have to say, okay, well, let's go out for a cup of coffee, let's go to dinner. And so they had the first date before they found out a lot of the information. When you don't know a lot about someone up front, it has a lot to do with conflict and how you handle it. It impacts separation. It even impacts divorce rates. So I'm curious, how personal do you get before you begin a relationship with someone? If you're willing to share, give us a call, 213-8995, and you know the area code's 412, forgive me, or text 412-218-3888. How personal do you get? What kind of questions do you ask? How much information do you need before you begin a relationship? And do you know things like their political views, their core values? Are those things important to you? On a previous show, we did talk about, I think it might have even been the last show, we talked about knowing someone's financial status. Not that you necessarily need to know everything about their money, how much they make, what's in the bank, but at least have some idea as to, are they secure with money? Are they someone who spends recklessly? What's their credit look like? And those are not questions that you're going to just come out right and ask, or at least I wouldn't recommend that. But through conversation, you pay attention. How do they dress? What do they drive? Maybe if you have an idea of what part of town they live on, just ask different things about them, but it will start to reveal their view on money and other things. So how comfortable would you be, asking somebody, or would you be comfortable sharing that information if someone were to ask it of you? I'm not sure if you'd be comfortable sharing it. If not, then you might not be comfortable asking. But those are things that you need to take a look at. Another area for a key difference, I mentioned the mental health difference. Mental health and vulnerability is another key area. So Gen Z, they view couples therapy as a maintenance tool. They don't look at it like a relationship failure or a sign of failure. When you look at Gen Xers, many times they feel like you only go to counseling if something is broken. And that's not true. One of the things that I often say is that not everyone needs counseling, but everyone can benefit from counseling. It's like continuous growth, it's continuous improvement. It's like if you play sports, how often do you go out and run drills? You might be the best free throw shooter on the team, but is there room for you to get even better? Just because you're the best on your team doesn't mean that you're going to be the best on the team that you're playing against. So you don't just stop and say, you know what, I shoot just fine. No, you keep working at it so that you get better and better and better. And it's the same thing with anything else. So when you look at therapy in a relationship, you can view it like maintenance. Sometimes, like many churches, for instance, will have a requirement that the couple that's engaged and thinking about getting married go through premarital counseling, because what they're doing is trying to help you see whether or not you're aligned with your potential partner. They want you to see if there are disagreements and with respect to how we view life and what we want out of life, then let's smooth them out before you walk down the aisle. So when Gen Zers don't have a problem, or as much of a problem, doing those things, they have experienced more open dialogue, perhaps between parents, because Gen Zers, their parents are probably either more mature Gen X or they're baby boomers. And most of the time, when you think about that, I mean, think about it. If you watch the old reruns of sitcoms like the Dick Van Dyke Show, or things back in that era. I'm trying to even think of what might be another one. Father Knows Best. If you probably weren't around to watch them live, but if you remember watching them in syndication, folks didn't even sleep in the same bed. A husband and wife had twin beds. So the culture back then was, we don't even talk about those things, much less get into letting our children hear us talk about such things. So the dialogue between parents wasn't there. And maybe they saw their parents resolve issues without therapy. So they feel like, okay, well, we can do the same thing. Now, that being said, it's interesting that the Gen X, I'm sorry, the Gen Z generation is reported as being the unhappiest generation. I haven't found any real information to tell me why, but I will say that studies have shown that they have a lower well-being, they have higher rates of loneliness, and they report being in despair, which is not quite the same as depression. Despair is just kind of, feeling down, sad, those kinds of things. I think this is, the world according to Dr. Linda. I think the fact that they're in that no touch environment, the fact that they have few actual telephone conversations, they do everything online. there's a lot of talk now around AI and whether or not it's good for young people to use, because there are reports of certain kids who have committed suicide because in dialogue with AI gave them the go ahead to do that. When you have removed that human touch and you've removed people from your existence, I can see how it leads to loneliness and more despair. So studies have shown that 42% of Gen Zers are actually struggling with mental health issues. That's a lot. That's almost half of that population. So again, we're talking about people between the ages of 14 and 29. They haven't even lived enough life to have those kinds of issues. So why are they struggling so much with mental health, despair, loneliness, etc.? Now, Gen X, they often grew up with in that tough love type of mentality, parents who believed in tough love. And many Gen X people are counseling averse. They don't want anything to do with counseling. They believe that it's a sign of a failure, that it's a way of someone saying you're not good enough, so here, go and be fixed. That's not what counseling is about, but many times that's what people think it is, particularly if they are Gen X or older. They would rather get help from friends or family or church or just suffer in silence. Now, I'm not saying that friends and family and church can't help you, but why not go to a professional? A lot of times I hear people say, I'm not going to sit there and tell a stranger all my personal business. That stranger, and since I've been on that side of the table, I can tell you that stranger is not really interested. We're not going back to gossip about what you did and what you're going through, etc. But how do you know? How do you know that Pookie and Ray Ray and them down the street are not going to be talking about who you are, what you did, all of those kinds of things? And many times the people that we talk to, the ones that we confide in, their situation is not much better than ours. So how are they going to help you when they can't even help themselves? So enough on the counseling stuff, but that is another difference when it comes to looking at Gen X versus Gen Z. Marriage and divorce. Gen X people often prioritize staying together for the kids or out of some duty instead of their own personal happiness. A lot of Gen Xers who are in uh, less than satisfying marriages would stay for the good of the kids, that they felt it was their responsibility. So when the kids are grown and out of high school, then we can go ahead and split. But for now, we need to stay together. Whereas Gen Z, they their view, because some of them are married, remember we go up to age 29, but their view is that they are more likely to view marriage as something that's negotiable. It's a negotiable choice rather than a solid mark or milestone. And they're generally more comfortable with divorce if a relationship becomes toxic. When you think about it, in many cases, those Gen Z individuals may have come from a family where divorce was there. So they already saw parents unhappy, because no matter how parents try to hide it or shield it, your kids can feel the vibe. They know when things aren't working well. They're watching television and YouTube videos and other things where they are seeing people who are in love express themselves lovingly. So if they're not seeing that in the home, what it registers for them is that there's something missing. You guys aren't happy. You're not in love with one another. And they also know how they felt themselves being pulled and torn because of the fussing or fighting that was going on in the family. So thinking about those things makes them more likely to say, you know what, if it gets to that point, I don't want to be unhappy. I don't want to put my children through what I went through. So let's work something out. We'll either go to counseling, because remember, they are more aligned with counseling, or they decide to separate and go their own way. So can you see a connection? If you look at it, what would be the connection between your parents' relationship and your views on marriage? Again, it's not something that you necessarily have to share, though we're here for you if you want to, but think about what the home was like that you grew up in. And is there any connection between that and your views on marriage? So for example, if for your entire life, your parents were married, still married, happy couple, they have one another's back, they do everything together, you're more likely to have a more positive view on marriage. But conversely, if you grew up in a home where there was friction and fussing and fighting, you never really saw mom and dad do things together, not in the home or out of the home, it just seemed like they're two individuals, not a couple, not a team. then you might feel differently about marriage. Your view might be less positive because you might be feeling like, why should I lock myself down with someone and not be happy? So many times there is that connection. And again, I would just say, think about it. What are your views on marriage, first of all, and where do your views come from? Okay, so if we keep going down the list of different types of approaches between the generations, communication styles is another one. A Gen Z person would prefer to text. They do a digital check-in. They find out what's going on with not only friends, but what's going on in the world. Look to your kids. They might know the news, but not because they read a paper, whether it was actually physical or online, not because they watched it on television, but because they go to different apps and different sources on their phones to find out what's going on in the world. They would rather text people or leave a message on social media or a TikTok video or something rather than actually either have a voice conversation or, heaven forbid, go and sit down in the person's home and have an in-person visit. Now, I will confess that I like texting. I do have a lot of friends who are more into picking up the phone because Gen X is more likely to use the phone. That's how we grew up. So they're more likely to use the phone and to have deeper, long-lasting conversations. So clearly I'm not a Gen Z, but I like digital communication too. One of the reasons I like texting is because I think for the most part, it's fast and it's efficient. When I'm focused on doing something, I may not want to stop long enough to have a conversation, but I can shoot you a quick note via text. I can check in with you. I can limit the amount of time that we spend engaging because we don't have the time in a text to necessarily go through all the niceties or to go off on a different subject. In the text, we're going back and forth on what it is that we're talking about. And when you text with someone, if they text you and you don't have an answer right now, or you want to think about it for a while, it's easier to do that and then respond to a text than it would be if you were on the phone with them. So I do, I prefer some of the digital communication, but that's not typical of Gen X and baby boomers. So one thing I will say though is that it can be hard to read tone in a text. Sometimes people are misunderstood because we write it in a certain tone, but they might read it in a different tone. They may read into what you're saying, especially if you're using capital letters and emojis and all of those kinds of things. So it might be good if you're going to have a sensitive conversation or something that could be controversial, don't do that via text. Some people wonder if the lack of human contact is a factor for why Gen Z is lonely and unhappy. And like I told you earlier, I think that does have something to do with it. We were created to be in relationship. We were created to be in relationship. My foundation for that is biblical, but we were created to be in relationship. And even if you don't have a biblical foundation, think about this. Why is it that when someone in jail is being punished, they're put into solitary confinement? Now, jail in and of itself, never been, hope to God that I never go, but jail in and of itself is not necessarily a pleasant experience. So even as you're interacting with other inmates, that's not a pleasant experience. But on some level, it must be better than being alone because the punishment is being put into solitary confinement. So that to me is just further evidence that we were created to be in relationship. So how you communicate can be different. And it would be important to know, particularly if, let's say, you're at the fringe of one generation and the person that you're in a relationship with is into the next generation, you might, maybe not, but you might have different thoughts about how you communicate, and that could be a rub. Give you another one, and that would be monogamy versus exploration. Now, I think this one is really interesting. So, uh, Gen Z is known for what they call situationships. You know, what's a situationship? I'm glad you asked. A situationship is a romantic or sexual relationship that's not labeled, it's not explicitly defined. You're not claiming that person in any way, shape, or form. There's no real commitment to it, and there's no label to it. It's kind of in a gray area between friendship and committed partnership. and it's often inconsistent. But you can't get mad at them because it's just a situationship. So if they don't call you back, you can't get upset. If you haven't heard from them in 2 days, you can't get upset. There's no future planning. It has a lot of emotional ambiguity because you don't know where they're coming from or where they stand. It's almost like this is the way I think, not a Gen Zer, but I feel like I don't know how to respond to you if I don't know who you are to me and what you mean to me and who I am to you and what I mean to you. It's like, how am I supposed to handle this situation? So it really is a gray area. But Gen Z, they're more prone to those situationships and they're more prone to sexual exploration because in those situationships, back in the day, people talked about friends with benefits. Now, in that situationship, you can have some people be in a situation with some that you are sexually involved in. So they're more into sort of the sexual exploration. On the other hand, Gen Xers tend to be more monogamous. And so you can see that there are some differences. So we're coming up close to the break. Got a few more minutes before we break. So one of the things I want to do is just kind of recap some of that because I gave you a lot. So if we're looking at uh, the mentality with respect to relationships, when it comes to something like your primary goal, the primary goal for someone who's Gen X is to find a life partner, whether it's going to be their spouse or just their committed partner. They are looking for to find that one special person that they can do life with. But the primary goal for Gen Z is authenticity and self-discovery. Who can I um, be around that will let me be myself, where I don't have to hide a part of me, I don't have to walk on eggshells. I can learn about myself in the process, excuse me, because they allow me to be my authentic self. When it comes to commitment, Gen X, marriage is the way to go. They feel like it's a duty, it's the next step, it's how we grow in relationship. But with Gen Z, commitment is an intentional choice and is based on your values. Do we, what are my values about marriage? Do your values line up with mine? And so they're more intentional with it. They go more, it's almost like more of a head thing than a heart thing. Not that the heart isn't involved, but they're not necessarily led by the heart. They're looking at the lineup, the alignment of it. Conflict. Gen X, they often tough it out, man up, stop crying, whatever the case might be. Black women are often told, be strong, those kinds of things. So they tough it out just to keep the peace. But Gen Zers, they don't mind conflict. They don't see it as a negative thing. They see it as part of the self-discovery. They see it as them being authentic and you being authentic. And when two authentic people come together, sometimes there's going to be some friction. But they understand that when you can work through that friction, either on your own or with the help of a therapist, the end result is that you're going to know more about yourself and more about the other person. Couple more. Getting ready for that first date. With Gen X, there's low emphasis on shared values, finances, politics. Gen Xers are not necessarily thinking about asking those questions up front. But on the other hand, Gen Z, like I told you, they look at a lot of that stuff before they even go out with you on the first date. So they're a little different there. And then lastly is sex and intimacy. Gen X, higher early physical activity. You know, after a few dates, might not even take a few dates. Gen Xers see that as part of the relationship dance. And so they are more likely to get involved sexually early on. Whereas Gen Z folks don't rush into it. They're waiting to make sure that there's an alignment going on. But when they do get sexually involved, they're going to be open. They are more open. They explore. Um, it's been said that they can be more on the kinky side because it's all about self self exploration and authenticity. All of those things. So think about it. Are you a Gen Z? And if you are, what are your thoughts about some of the things that I just shared? And maybe you're not a Gen Z, but you're close to one, like maybe your child, your niece or nephew, a younger brother or sister. So do these statements hold true for those people that you know who are Gen Z? Remember in the beginning, I said, think about who you know that fits in those categories. So it is time for a break. And when we come back, we're going to take a closer look at Gen X. Now, remember, this is the generation that was born between 1965 and 1980. So they are roughly, there are not hard lines to this. They're roughly between the ages of 46 and 61. And they face a unique set of dating challenges today, largely stemming from this whole technologically inclined digital kind of world that they're existing in, because it's not the world that they grew up in. So we're going to talk about some of that when we come back. And if you're just joining, come back after the break. We are talking about marriage. Is it dying? Is it an old institution? And how different generations are viewing relationships and marriage. This is Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN, and we'll be right back.
Looking for a cost-effective way to help increase your company's bottom line? Look no further than Soul Pit Media. With our award-winning print, internet, podcast, and Soul Pit television options, we can help your business get to that next level. For more information, contact Craig Dawson at 412-407-7685. That's 412-407-7685. And let Soul Pit Media take you to that next level.
Business owners thinking about back-to-school promotions and replacing summer flavors with pumpkin? What about your taxes? Reduce your stress and tax liabilities by planning for tax time now with Cameron Professional Services Group. CPSG takes your goals, values, and visions to create a custom tax plan catered specifically to your business. We work closely with you to ensure that as your business grows and goals shift, so will your custom plan. Located in the Hill District in Pittsburgh, PA, CPSG is a CPA and consultant firm, providing services in accounting, auditing, tax planning and preparation, community development, and operational management. Call Cameron Professional Services Group today at 412-251-0607.
Have you had the Beat by Niche experience? Beat by Niche is one of the top makeup artists in the city of Pittsburgh. She's touched the face of Cardi B, love and hip hop personalities, and various Steeler wives. If you have not sat in her chair, what are you waiting for? Visit beatbyniche.com to schedule your special makeover for all occasions: weddings, graduations, proms, photo ops, and more. Visit beatbyniche.com and experience the touch of excellence.
Pittsburgh, it's an old R&B, old school, rap, hip hop, and all the jams that make you move and dance. Yes, check it out. Each Saturday, right here on Pittsburgh's DSEN. All the old school jams, 6 to 11 p.m.
Pittsburgh, have you seen our Sunday radio schedule? Ooh, it is lit. Start the day off with our Sunday gospel music from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. It will inspire you and have you praising the Lord. Then from 3 to 8 p.m., we bring you Sunday jazz melody for all the jazz lovers. Then cap off the night with the Quiet Storm from 8 to 11 p.m. to hear the best smooth, romantic, and soulful R&B sounds of yesterday and today. All that each Sunday on Pittsburgh's DSEN, the place for soul.
imagine they could.
Yes, welcome back. If you are looking for some nuggets on relationships, looking for some things that maybe you could do differently, then you're at the right place. You're at Relationship Conversations. I'm Dr. Linda Bing, and we are on Pittsburgh's DSEN. So let's get back to our conversation, talking about some of the ways that Gen Z and Gen X differ. I told you we would go a little deeper into Gen X. So if you are a Gen X person, please feel free to call and voice your opinion. You can reach me at 412 213 8995, or if you'd rather text, that number is 412 218 3888. Now, regardless of your generation, do you relate more with the views of Gen X or Gen Z? Like I told you, it's Gen Z that prefers some of the digital communication. I'm not a Gen Z person, but in a lot of ways, I prefer that as well. Some of it could be because I talk for a living. I am a trainer, a facilitator, a coach, a consultant. Everything I do is about talking and interacting with people, whether I'm delivering a training class virtually or in person at some corporate location, or if I am coaching someone, whether I'm coaching them individually or in a group coaching format. I told you um, I'm a certified menopause coach. And so we did have a show earlier where we talked about menopause. We'll do a lot more of that, I promise you, because women, you would be surprised, and the men too, at how much your body actually goes through during those menopausal years. But I'm always talking to people. And then on Monday nights, here I am on the air talking to you. So I think because I have to speak so much, when it's just something quick or I'm just checking in on somebody, yeah, I probably do a text more. So which one do you identify with? Are you more like Gen X or more like Gen Z? Let me talk about some of the primary dating challenges for Gen X. Because think about it, if you are 46 to 61, dating in that particular age range, which is pretty broad, but dating in that age range is not the same as it was when you were in your 20s and 30s. The world has changed. People's situations have changed. And so if you've never been married, you may have gradually changed along with the times. However, if you were connected either through marriage or just a tight committed relationship, and now you're back in the game again, totally different. Totally different. So one of the things that Gen Xers talk about is that they suffer from dating app fatigue. They get tired of it. And again, remember, Gen Xers were not brought up on technology the way Gen Z people are. So it feels unnatural at first to be looking for someone online. 77% of Gen X people who were surveyed reported that they feel tired of dating apps. And some of it, if you've ever been on one, some of it, people just get tired of all the BS, folks playing games, people putting up pictures that aren't themselves, or catfishing you with a picture that was them 20 years ago, people talking about things that are no longer relevant to who they are today. So unlike the younger generations, Gen Xers didn't grow up dealing with the digital first. They were able to more readily read somebody's body language, listen to the tone of voice, all of that as they were getting to know them. But that's not necessarily the case today. So yeah, people are getting tired of the swipe culture. Many Gen Xers find that swipe culture to be almost like a dehumanizing numbers game. How many people do you have to go through before you can hit on a good one? So they say that it gives you high volumes, but it's high volumes of low quality matches. I don't know. What's your experience? Have you ever been on any dating apps? And, many years ago, they were looked down upon. I remember, again, I'm aging myself, but you already know it's all good. So even before the dating apps, remember there were those phone lines, and there's still some of them around today because I see the commercials. I'm a late night person, and sometimes when I'm up late at night watching a movie or something, those kind of commercials still come on. So at first it was the phone hookup lines, and then it migrated to being the dating app so that you could at least see the person that you were talking to. But when people were back in the day of the hookup lines, folks often felt like you only did that out of desperation. And a lot of people didn't want to look for dates using technology because they didn't want to feel like they were saying, I'm desperate. Now that we're in this digital age fully and completely, that stigma has really gone away. So if you're a Gen Xer and you're not feeling the apps, I'm not recommending them, but I'm just saying consider them. You know, it is an option. It's something that you can try because now it's part of the norm. Another dating challenge is that Gen X people are in the sandwich generation, and there's lots of pressure in the sandwich generation. So I know you've heard this before. The sandwich generation means that you are somebody who is still taking care of children, but at the same time, you're also taking care of elderly parents. And so you are in the middle, but you spend so much of your time caretaking, whether it's the children and you're chauffeuring them around or attending their ball games, their concerts, the plays that they're in. After a busy day at work, you have to put in a lot of time with the kids. But your second shift, or maybe it's your third shift, kicks in when you now have to also check on the parents. Make sure they've taken their medication. Did they get to their doctor's appointment? Maybe you're chauffeuring them also, taking them to doctor's appointments. Did they eat today? All of those things. So Gen Xers often find time that there's, though they find that there's so much pressure coming at them from the kids, the parents, the job, and everything else that they don't have the time to date. Or sometimes they feel like they don't have the mindset. You know, they're so drained of energy that putting forth the effort to get to know somebody brand new is just more than they are willing to do. So that sandwich generation really puts dating on low on the priority list for a lot of Gen Xers. And for some of them, it's not on the list at all. Another thing would be post-divorce shock. Let's just call it that. So for some people, re-entering that dating pool after decades of marriage and now being alone again, it often feels like they're visiting a brand new country. People like imagine, especially if think about someone who maybe was married to a spouse for decades and perhaps that spouse has passed on, and so now they're decided they don't want to be alone. They're getting back out there into the dating world because again, if you're in your 50s, you still have a lot of life left in you. And 50s are Gen Xers. You know, I've been watching again when you look at some of these commercials that come on. There's an insurance company, and in their commercials, there are a couple of them where there are these young women. They look like they could be late 30s, early 40s, and they're talking about the fact that husband died of a heart attack. You know, somebody passed at 34, those kinds of things. So tomorrow's not promised to any of us. You can be widowed or become a widower much earlier than you would expect. But anyway, once you're ready to get back out there, people are talking a different language. Can you even keep up with the slang? If you're texting someone, do you know what all of those abbreviations mean? What are the acronyms? Sometimes I have to stop and think, okay, what do these 3 or 4 letters mean? Oh, okay, I got it. So it's like being in a totally new culture. And so folks getting back into the dating game again, they have to learn how to navigate through these modern concepts. They have to understand ghosting. They have to understand situationships and breadcrumbing. And okay, breadcrumbing is another one. That was a fairly new term for me. It's a tactic that people use when they're dating, where someone sends like sporadic, flirtatious, non-committal messages, breadcrumbs, and they do it just to kind of keep you on the hook. They don't really have any intentions of having a long-term serious relationship with you, but you're kind of like their backup, you know? And so I need to keep you around just in case, but I'm really not that interested in you. But when other things that I'm interested in aren't working out and I just need some place to go and lay my head, yeah, you might be the one. So they have to breadcrumb you. They feed you little bits and pieces here and there. It's a form of manipulation, but it's something that's happening. People do it sometimes just to avoid loneliness. And if you're just getting back in the game, you may not recognize that that's something that's happening on a large scale. And so you are getting all wrapped up into the flirtatiousness of this individual. And when you don't hear from them for a couple of days, you're wondering, are they okay? Maybe they haven't called because they're hurt, they're injured, you know, or did I do something to offend them? No, you're just being breadcrumbed. Another one, trust and emotional baggage. Now, you know, we all have some baggage. as you go through life, it doesn't matter how good your life is, you're picking up experiences along the way. So as you go through life, you are picking up, you might start out just from a woman's perspective, you're putting things in your purse, then you have a bigger tote bag, then, you might have a carry-on, and then you've got a set of luggage, and now comes a trunk. I mean, as you go through life, you just pick up more and more things, experiences, whether it's significant heartbreak, it could be the exuberance that comes from somebody who is highly romantic, or, maybe you were hurt by infidelity, whatever it is. But because Gen Xers are older, chances are that they have struggled more with some of those things. The longer you live, the more time you have to accumulate. So for many Gen Xers, if you have not learned how to unpack your bags, and again, that's something that therapy can help with. That's something that, as a certified relationship specialist, that I often help people with. When I would do premarital counseling, largely through my church, but when I would do premarital counseling for couples, part of what I'm doing is I am helping them unpack. Let's see what you're carrying around with you and see how we can lighten this load, because you don't need to take clothes from 10 years ago into today. Some things just get dated. You need to leave them alone. And the same thing goes on with experiences and emotions. Leave that back in the year 2010 where it belongs. Don't try to carry that with you into 2026. And your nervous system picks up on some of those things. So yeah, we just need to make sure that everybody is handling stuff well. There's a term called a dysregulated nervous system. And sometimes it's just amazing to me how much science there really is in relationships. People don't necessarily see it that way. And that's why some people feel like, psychology, that's nothing. Or, going to counseling, what do they know? Well, what we know is the scientific connection. There is a discipline behind it. It's not just a matter of talking to people and talking through things. But anyway, there is a term called the dysregulated nervous system. And it occurs when your body's stress response system, that fight or flight system, when it's out of whack. Um, the calming system, the things that help calm you down, are out of balance. So your nervous system is out of regulation. It's dysregulated, and it can be brought on by trauma. It can be brought on by stress, like the stress that goes along with divorce. Divorce is a stressful thing. And if it was not an amicable divorce, it can be some significant trauma. I remember talking to a woman where she and her husband, or her ex-husband, had been apart for more than 10 years, and they still were going through the drama of who gets what and how do we divide things and all of that. And I'm not sure the details, so I don't know how it is that a lot of that stuff didn't get worked out in the court system, but just, I guess, collecting on some of the things that the court said one person needed to give to the other. So it was traumatizing. She couldn't really move on well with her life. And she wasn't a client of mine. She was just someone I knew in a professional setting. So she couldn't really get on with her life because she's still dealing with all the stress and the trauma that was going on in a marriage that she's been out of for 10 years. So those kinds of things, like, leave your body. You're either stuck in high alert and you're hyper vigilant. You're looking around, you're suspicious of everybody. You don't want to get in a relationship because you're afraid that you're going to run into the same type of trauma. Or if you're not stuck in high alert, then you're just completely shut down and you feel like it's not worth it. I'm just not going to put myself in position to go through that again. And so you might be in a position where you have a dysregulated nervous system. If there's chronic anxiety, you're always tired, um, you feel burnt out all the time, you have digestive issues, you're emotionally unstable. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was caused by some trauma in your life, because those things that I just described, yes, it does mean that your nervous system is out of whack, but there are other things that could be causing that as well. As a matter of fact, I talked to you about menopause. Believe it or not, ladies, menopause causes all of that. Everything I just mentioned: anxiety, fatigue, burnout, digestive issues, emotional instability. When the estrogen in your body decreases, some women, not all, but a good number of women experience all of those things. So deregulation, dysregulation of your nervous system. And it's almost like your threat detection system. It's not firing anymore. It's not picking up on the dangers around you. And so any new partner, their actions might be completely innocent. You know, maybe they didn't text you back immediately because they were tied up in a meeting, or maybe they were at the airport going through the security check line, or, there could be any number of reasons why someone didn't get right back to you. Maybe their tone was a little different to you, or maybe you got into a little minor disagreement. Any of those things, if you're coming out of a situation that had betrayal or abandonment, then you are likely to your mind just starts thinking that this is what's going on again. So someone who is completely innocent is often misjudged, and it's not about them, it's about you. It's about the fact that you have not unpacked your bags and you are on that high alert, you're being hyper vigilant, and everything looks like a threat to you. So there's a self-fulfilling prophecy that's created. The anxiety leads to the behaviors that you are afraid of. You're so anxious about it, you're so worried that this person might leave you, that you engage in behaviors that make them want to get far away from you. So they weren't trying to, but you sabotaged it, and now they are. I was reading something, and this woman said, dating after you get divorced, you are a literal crazy person. That was her experience. She said the time that she spent maturing in other areas of her life, professionally, socially, spiritually, all these different ways, none of that prepared her for the sudden insecurity that she felt once she started dating after divorce. She felt insecure. She didn't know if she still had it. Am I pretty? Am I smart? Do I have what it takes to attract someone? If I was all of that, maybe my husband wouldn't have left. All of those thoughts were firing in her head, and they were getting in the way of her happiness and her finding a new relationship. So basically, struggling with the nervous system dysregulation, or that kind of threat detection system that just keeps firing in new relationships, it means that your nervous system is operating from a place of survival rather than connection. When you are working hard just to survive, you cannot make an authentic connection with another person. You don't have it in you. And guess what? They can see it. They see the insecurity. It's almost like it gives off an aroma. They smell it on you. People can tell when you are insecure, desperate, all of that. And it gets in the way of you finding the connection that you're looking for. The final challenge that I'll give you, and of course, I'm open to hear your thoughts. The final challenge that I'll mention is when your gender expectations don't line up. So Gen X women significantly report frustration that their partners still hold on to traditional gender roles. They expect them to be the one that does the cooking and the house cleaning and the laundry and those kinds of things. Well, Gen X women, remember, they're pretty self-sufficient because they were latchkey kids. They came home and they did those things for themselves. In fact, they did a lot of stuff for themselves. So they're of the mindset of take care of that yourself. These women were raised to be independent, career focused, and do it all, not to take care of someone else. And so because of that, as adults now, they are navigating careers. They might be in that sandwich generation, taking care of the children and the parents. And so while single, they are providing for themselves. So the mindset is sort of, back in the day, it was man's work to work and provide for the family, and it was women's work to stay home and take care of things. So now these women are saying, okay, I am also out there making money and contributing. So I'm doing both roles. You need to do both roles as well, because we no longer have the luxury of a man doing what was typically thought of as a traditional male role and a woman doing what was traditionally thought of as a female role. So when a Gen X woman butts up against a man who still has certain gender expectations, many of those women, they're just not going for it. And what's sometimes even worse than that is when the woman goes along to get along, okay, while I'm dating him, he wants me to do those things. I'll do that. I'll come over and do his laundry. I'll help clean the house. I'll do his shopping and cooking for him. And you think that that's drawing you closer together, but it may not be. I'm not going to say that it's not, but it may not be, especially if those are not the things that you just naturally want to do, because at some point you will get tired of it and you will resent it, and then you've got a problem. So I'll do a quick review. Almost time for a break. Time is going fast. We'll look at some of the challenges faced by the Gen Xers. One is the logistics of navigating dating when you're taking kids where they need to go, taking parents where they need to go, when your job is demanding and you have a certain amount of work that you have to do. A lot of people don't just work 40-hour work week anymore. Some people have to travel with their jobs. So sometimes just the logistics of dating is enough to keep a Gen Xer from wanting to date. And then let's not forget distance. You know, like I live in the metro Atlanta area, and depending on the time of day, it could take you 2 hours to go 40 miles, you know? So sometimes people, and that's one of the things about apps, is that when you're on an app, you don't necessarily know where that person lives. So it might just say Atlanta. And so now you're vibing with somebody, and when you find out they're way on the other side, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do that. So that's one of the things that's real. You know, distance gets in the way. Sometimes with those apps, you're finding somebody that, you know, people like looking for folks in other countries. Okay, well, have you really thought through that? How are you going to make that work? And are you really going to be satisfied with this long distance relationship and having to merge two cultures together? And who's going to be the one to make the move? Even if you're looking within the country, you're in one state, they're in another. How are you going to make that work? So logistics can be a problem. Trust, you know, healing from that gray divorce area that we talked about, or where there's long-term betrayal. So gray divorce, that means when a marriage, it's like the dissolving of a marriage among couples who are like 50 and older, often after they've been together for a long time, like unions of 20 years or more, and now they're getting divorced. It's a rising trend, and it's driven by longer life expectancies. People are living longer, and so marriages are lasting longer or not. But as people get older, different things start to change, and some people don't want to hold on. Some people don't want to go with the flow of the changes. And so a lot of times the divorce kind of centers on dividing up the complex assets, like I said with the woman that I was talking about. And so the trust with respect to how much do you get, and how much of my retirement fund or my social security, or should you still be on my insurance? You know, there are all kinds of things that people get caught up in. Another one is the tech gap. Now that we're into this technological digital world, that whole thing about, do you prefer phone calls or text messages? Um, are you using apps or not using apps? Just a lot of hit or miss going on because of technology. And then the last one that I'll mention is availability. When you think about it, the dating pool is getting smaller. And so a lot of peers, when you think about it, people that you might want to date, you have to think about this. Some of them are in your age bracket as a Gen Xer. They're married, or they're divorced with baggage of their own that needs to be worked through, or they might be incarcerated, or they might be, you know, there's a lot of drug addiction, not by choice, but by happenstance, people taking pain medications and then get hooked. So the pool of applicants is smaller. And now with all these other things, distance and logistics and all kinds of stuff, you have fewer people to select from. It really, for a lot of Gen Xers, creates what feels like an impossible situation. So we don't have time, of course, to cover all generations, but I wanted to compare and contrast those two, because it's a big divide, and gives you a chance to see some of the differences. So some people might belong to what we call the silent generation, and those are people that are between the ages of 62 and 80. Um, some people are in that age bracket. Actually, that's a little, yeah, I got 62 to 80, but no, it would be older than 62. Somebody 62 is a baby boomer. But at any rate, when you get older, there are people in their 70s and 80s who are still actively dating, still sexually active, etc. So they're different personalities, different approaches that someone in that particular generation would use. Baby boomers. Now, baby boomers would be right before Gen X. So they're like 62, maybe into their 70s or late 70s. And then there's Gen X. Then there are the millennials. Millennials are like 30 to 45. That's followed by Gen Z. And now the youngest generation today is called Generation Alpha, or Gen A. And they are the kids that are 13 and younger. So personally, I feel like not only should they not be dating, in my opinion, but also they don't need to be listening to this broadcast about what's going on in the dating world. So just think about it. Those are some of the different generations. And if you're going to date someone outside of your generation, it's important to know, at least in general, what might be their persuasion when it comes to approaching some of the things that we talked about. So think about the generation that you represent. What are your views on some of the dating patterns that I just talked about? We can discuss that and more when we come back. It's time for a break. I want you to listen to these great announcements from our sponsors and then come back. This is Relationship Conversations. I'm Dr. Linda Bing, and you're listening to Pittsburgh's DSEN.
Pittsburgh, it's an old school party. Yes, each Saturday we throw it back with some of the best old school music, funk, R&B, old school, rap, hip hop, and all the jams that make you move and dance. Yes, check it out. Each Saturday right here on Pittsburgh's DSEN. All the old school jams, 6 to 11 p.m.
Pittsburgh, have you seen our Sunday radio schedule? Ooh, it is lit. Start the day off with our Sunday gospel music from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. It will inspire you and have you praising the Lord. Then from 3 to 8 p.m., we bring you Sunday jazz melody for all the jazz lovers. Then cap off the night with the Quiet Storm from 8 to 11 p.m. to hear the best smooth, romantic, and soulful R&B sounds of yesterday and today. All that each Sunday on Pittsburgh's DSEN, the place for soul.
Looking for a cost-effective way to help increase your company's bottom line? Look no further than Soul Pit Media. With our award-winning print, internet, podcast, and Soul Pit television options, we can help your business get to that next level. For more information, contact Craig Dawson at 412-407-7685. That's 412-407-7685. And let Soul Pit Media take you to that next level.
Business owners thinking about back-to-school promotions and replacing summer flavors with pumpkin? What about your taxes? Reduce your stress and tax liabilities by planning for tax time now with Cameron Professional Services Group. CPSG takes your goals, values, and visions to create a custom tax plan catered specifically to your business. We work closely with you to ensure that as your business grows and goals shift, so will your custom plan. Located in the Hill District in Pittsburgh, PA, CPSG is a CPA and consultant firm, providing services in accounting, auditing, tax planning and preparation, community development, and operational management. Call Cameron Professional Services Group today at 412-251-0607.
Have you had the Beat by Niche experience? Beat by Niche is one of the top makeup artists in the city of Pittsburgh. She's touched the face of Cardi B, Love and Hip Hop personalities, and various Steeler wives. If you have not sat in her chair, what are you waiting for? Visit beatbyniche.com to schedule your special makeover for all occasions, weddings, graduations, proms, photo ops, and more. Visit beatbyniche.com and experience the touch of excellence.
Close your eyes, make a wish, and blow out the candlelight for tonight.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Now stop what you're doing before we get into the programming again. I want you to stop what you're doing and listen up, okay? Because Pittsburgh, it's that time again. May 7th, 8th, and 9th, Team X LLC is bringing back For the Love of the Dance Cancer Fundraiser Weekend. 4 electrifying events, 3 worthy organizations, 2 beautiful venues, all for one cause, to fight cancer. If you missed it last year, I'm telling you now, do not miss it again. We're kicking things off Thursday night at the Wyndham Grand downtown Pittsburgh. Teresa Hawthorne and Artistry. Friday, the Bill Henry Band, 2 of Pittsburgh's finest in one weekend, and Pittsburgh's DSCN will be broadcasting live. Saturday afternoon, Russell Thompson and Free Agent, and Saturday night, we close it out big with the gala at the August Wilson African American Center. Listen, this is more than a party. This is purpose with a beat. Weekend passes are just $140, or individual pricing for each event also exists. Early bird discounts on weekend passes will end. Actually, it's already ended. It ended April 17th. Sorry about that. So don't wait. Get your tickets on Eventbrite, or you can call Lance Clemens. His number is 412-294-2211. Say that again, 412-294-2211. So May 7th through the 9th, Pittsburgh is the place to be. For the Love of the Dance Cancer Fundraiser Weekend event, be there. All right, let's get back to our topic. This is relationship conversations, and the conversation of the night all focuses around marriage and dating and relationships and how they're being redefined, basically, in this new generation. So I want to keep going in that vein and give you a little extra attention to people over 50. So we started out broadly looking at Gen Z and Gen X. Then I kind of honed in on Gen X a little bit. And within the Gen X generation, I think people 50 and over have still another layer of challenges to get through. So if you're in that age bracket, listen up, pay attention. We're going to talk about some of the top challenges that people are saying they face as a result of being over 50 in the dating pool. So one is that the older you get, the more established you are in your lifestyle and the more baggage you have. So we did talk about baggage, and that does apply to Gen Xers in general. But most daters at this stage, they have like well-set routines. You know, they have routines around what to eat, when to eat, the different times, what they watch on television, and a variety of different things. So what happens is it becomes difficult to break free of that routine. This is the way it's done. And sometimes people feel as if the way they do it, because they've been doing it for so long, they might feel like there is no other way. So it can be difficult kind of merging that. Another challenge is that by the time you're in your 50s, many times, not always, but many times you have older children. They may even be adults. And so how does that all come together? Because your adult children may not approve of you dating, and they may not approve of your choice. And then there are existing health issues that people start to develop, might be some financial histories taking place. So all of these things come together, and it makes it difficult or more challenging, because it's always challenging starting a new relationship, but it makes it even more challenging to get these things done. So getting your established world to sort of line up with someone else's is not an easy thing. And people are okay with change as long as they're not the one that's being asked to change. So another common concern, especially for independent women, is something that's called nurse with a purse. It's the nurse with a purse trap. Now, I am not on TikTok. I'm not a TikTok person. I mean, yeah, I do have an account because I have to do social media to kind of promote my business, but I'm not really one who's on there. It's like, it's just not my choice of social media. But there's something that is trending on TikTok, and it's called nurse with a purse. It describes a female, a nurse. Now, not that all nurses are female, but it describes a female nurse who is financially stable, independent, and often sought after by men for financial support in relationships. Matching partners who are looking for someone to provide either caregiving or financial support rather than true companionship is what this nurse with a purse trap is all about. apparently there are folks who think that, okay, nurses make a lot of money. So now if I could just hook up with the nurse, I'm set. And that's the trap about it all. And so that's one of the things that people say they have to look out for. So whether it's gold diggers who are swiping right because they want social or financial security, or the assumption that every nurse is secretly rich, the conversation is sparking a lot of laughs, and I'm told a lot of eye rolls on nurse on TikTok. And so another spin on the nurse with the purse trap is because some folks on the dating scene are looking for a caregiver. Many people feel like, okay, here's a woman, she's a nurse, I connect with her, she's already a nurturing spirit, she's going to take care of me. So they either want a nurse to baby them through life, or they want a purse to keep their wallets nice and full. Basically, it's a choice between, it's like playing Florence Nightingale or Sugar Mama. You know, you're trying to decide which one do I want. But that's one of the traps that I'm told people are seeing as a trend, and women over 50 are, getting trapped in that. Another thing, when you're over 50, family and adult children become or can become a challenge, because adult children are sometimes overprotective of their parents, particularly opposite sex. So if you're a woman over 50 and you have adult sons, those sons are usually going to be more overprotective than the daughter. And if you are an adult male over 50, you usually have, if you have a daughter, she's an adult, and she is going to be overprotective of you more so than your sons would be. Sometimes it's due to safety concerns. Sometimes it might be because of inheritance or loyalty. They feel like somehow you're being disloyal to the deceased or the former spouse. But because of their overprotective posture, they can interfere in the parent's relationship and often have an attitude towards the new partner. And so it puts the parent in the middle, having to choose between the child and their love interest. And that really isn't fair to anybody. So family members and adult children can express their opinion to their parent, but it needs to end there. Just as children don't want parents trying to direct their relationship, they shouldn't try to direct their parents' relationship either. But it does make for a stickier situation because you want everyone to get along, and it can be difficult if you feel like you have to choose between your children and your love interest. And then the last one that I'll mention today, though it's certainly not the least, is this instant chemistry myth. Many times people who are over 50 and dating, they expect fireworks. Maybe they had fireworks in their youth and they're expecting the same thing again. But, mature attraction isn't usually based on fireworks. Often kind of grows slowly through emotional safety and shared values rather than some high intensity sparks that happen right away. And in reality, sparks are lust, not love. Now, I know that may be hard for some people to swallow. Think about that. When maybe it'll click in when we're gone, but sparks are really lust, not love. It's a chemistry, it's a sexual tension, it's an attraction, but it's not based on anything real, because love is a verb. Love is a way of behaving that's driven by a certain mindset. So when people talk about love at first sight, no, that was lust at first sight. Love does not exist. You don't even know that person. You cannot love something that you do not even know. So there is no love at first sight. It didn't exist when you were young, and it doesn't exist when you're over 50 either. So don't base a mature relationship on chemistry and feelings. That's not long lasting. Don't base it on the visuals, because things will go south. People are not going to look the same. And so you can't base it on that. This is where you really need to make sure that you're aligned on your things like finances and views on life and politics and core values and things along those lines. Because remember, at the top of the show, I shared with you that 90% of Gen Zers prefer to align on politics, finances, and core values before even a first date. So you might want to take a page from the Gen Zers when it comes to that. What are your thoughts, Pittsburgh? What are your thoughts? Again, I ask you the question, how personal do you get before you begin a relationship? Do you find out all the pertinent information before you get in too deep? Because sometimes once you really get in and the feelings start to flow, and now you found out, oh man, there's some deal breakers here, it's harder to pull back. So do you know people's core values? Do you know what's important to them, where they stand on different issues that might be of significance to the health of the relationship? I'd love to hear it. I'd also like to know if you found love after 50, let us know because your experience might be creating hope for someone else. So call me 412-213-8995 or text me 412-218-3888. I'd also like to know if you're finding this information interesting or helpful, just send a quick text and let me know. I'd love to hear it. Put it in, if you're watching the recording of this, put it in the chat, put it in the comment section. We like to know if we're on point, bringing you information that is relevant and interesting and somewhat entertaining or not. So put it in the chat for us. And also I would tell you to comment on what are some things that you might like to talk about. But now, if you're going to send something that you want to talk about, then you need to what? Talk. You need to make sure that you call in, you ask your questions, you get the help that you're looking for. So something came through on YouTube, I think. Let me see. All right, this person is saying that most men want to marry women aged 18 to 25. That is a woman's prime years. Most women want to marry between the ages of 30, or they want to marry somebody age 30 and older. That's why marriage is dying. Men want young wives in their prime, not in their decline. That's an interesting perspective, and there may be some truth to that. I think there are lots of reasons why marriage is dying. But first of all, I should say thank you for sending in your comment. I appreciate that. But yeah, I would say that there's some of that. Absolutely, there's some of that. I don't know that men are looking for women 18 to 25. It depends on how old that man is. But men, on occasion, for the majority, maybe do like women that are a little bit younger than them. But there are a lot of cougars out there too. You know, there are some women that they like young men. So you could be 45 and not interested in that 50-year-old man. You're more interested in that 48-year-old, you know? So there are lots of factors that are coming into play. But I do agree with you that there is a perception. I don't know how real it is, but it does exist. Just don't know to what extent that men like to marry younger women and women like to marry older men. So yeah, men want young women in their prime, not in the decline. And then, you know, you have to think about what's the decline? You know, what's the decline? What really is going to change? Because sometimes I think that might be a myth as well. What's really declining? For me, it was important to have somebody whose age is close to mine because I want us to have similar interests and abilities. You know, I'm not trying to run behind somebody who's a lot younger and spry and can keep up with a lot of the sports and the activities and all of the things that might exhaust me as I get older. You know, there's a period in life where you guys might be simpatico, but then as the older one is going to continue aging it seemingly faster, and that younger one might become bored. You know, like when I think about things like cougar women and the fact that yes, you might look good for your age, I give you that, and you might be able to pull a younger man, I give you that. But as you get older and he's still a younger man, are you going to be able to hold his interest? Is he going to want someone that's still going to go out and maybe ski and, you know, rollerblade and hike and all the things that maybe attracted the two of you in the first place, but you're not going to be able to keep up for as long as he is? So is he going to get tired of not being able to go because you can't? Or is he going to find someone else to go with? I mean, it's a real concern. And as you age, if your health fails, now is he going to get tired of being a caretaker? So I think many times when you're closer in age, you're experiencing the same stages of life together. Nothing is going to be exact, and that people can get ill or injured at any age, which could change the whole dynamic of things. But at least if someone's in your same age bracket, you probably would have similar interests and abilities, which forms a bond instead of driving you apart from one another. So again, thank you for texting. If anybody else has a thought, a comment, a question, please feel free to share it with us. I'd love to know what some of the rest of you think about why marriage might be dying. give you some tips for success. Okay. So, particularly if you're over 50 or in that Gen X stage of life, here are some things. You want to define your non negotiables. Now, actually, this could work for anybody, but define your non negotiables. Make a list maybe of the first 5 things that come to mind for you that are must have. These are things that you cannot be in a relationship without. So it might be, and think about make it truly a must have, not a want. You might want him to be 6'2", but is that a must have? I mean, if he's 5'11", is that okay? So think about what's a real must have versus a nice to have. Maybe thinking about someone who is empathetic. That might be a quality that's a must have. So think about 5 must haves and think about 5 deal breakers, things that you just can't tolerate. Maybe you refuse to be with a smoker. Maybe you refuse to be with someone who just uses profanity to a large extent. There's some things that are deal breakers, but you need to know what your non-negotiables are. And the more you can keep that top of mind, it will help you screen people more effectively. It's similar again to the compatibility shopping list that I told you about. That is an important thing. Know what you want and know what's a must have versus a nice to have. You may have to make some compromises. Now, that's not the same as settling, but you might have to make some compromises. So I usually tell people, when you jot things down like those must haves and deal breakers, it just helps to keep it top of mind. And before you leave the house, be open to meeting people wherever you go. So maybe what you do is read through your list, just to keep it top of mind. It's important. I call it a shopping list, and think about it. 2 cardinal rules about shopping. One is, especially grocery shopping. Let's use that one. Rule number 1, you never go grocery shopping when you're hungry. And rule number 2, you don't go shopping without a list. Because when you break those rules, you end up with items that you don't need and possibly things that you don't want to have, and then sometimes you might leave forgetting to purchase something that you really did need. How many times you go into a store without a list, you get back home and it's like, oh man, I meant to pick up whatever it is. The same thing happens with people. If you don't have a list of what it is that you want so that you can hone in on that thing, and the list of things that you find as non-negotiable, the real deal breakers, it's going to be a problem. So in the end, it was not a successful shopping experience. Don't let that happen to you when you're in the market for a new partner. Okay. A second one would be to market your authentic self. Do not pretend to be someone that you're not. If you're on the app, use up-to-date pictures. Make sure that it's well lit so they can see you, Don't hide behind the shades and the hat and the everything else. Let people see who you are and make sure that it's actually you. And then when you get into conversation, don't embellish and don't minimize the bad things. Sometimes we want to add on to make ourselves sound better, or we leave out certain things because we think, oh, that might make me look bad. Well, sooner or later, it's going to come out. Everybody has a past, and people have to accept your past along with your present and the projection of your future. So I'm not saying that you have to put all of your cards on the table as soon as you meet someone, but just present your authentic self. Because the reality is, if they like you and they find out that you were deceptive, now they're not going to trust you. So sometimes people, kind of fake it a little bit up front because they figure, okay, this is going to pull them in. And then once I reel them in and they've already decided that they like me, now when they see these other qualities, or they see that I really don't look quite that way, they're already hooked. But that's not necessarily true. People are going to be upset at the fact that you deceived them, and they're going to feel like they can't trust you. So now you have, you just totally messed up all around. If they were going to leave you in the first place based on something superficial, then good, because as long as they're in the way, they're blocking. If this is not the person for me, get out of the way so that the one who is supposed to be with me can find me. Okay. Another one is to learn about safe intimacy. Have the talk, whatever that is, about health. If your health is failing in some area, again, that's not necessarily something you talk about right away. You don't want to lead with that, or maybe you do. Maybe you want people to know so that you're not wasting time, but be honest about your health, about your expectations, about finances, about kids, and anything else that's important to you. And you want to do it preferably before you become physically intimate. Now, remember I said Gen Xers, when it comes to sexual intimacy, tend to get sexually involved at least earlier than Gen Zers do in a relationship. But good sex will make you overlook a lot of bad things. And you can't overlook them forever. After a while, the good sex, it might always be good, but it's not as important to you after a while. And then some of those other things that you were ignoring start to come out and stand out even more. And it's funny how when many other aspects of the relationship go bad, that good sex isn't so good anymore either. So no matter how old you are, and how sexually active you might be, please practice safe sex. That's another thing that safe intimacy is talking about. Because you get to a certain stage in life, ladies, where certainly you may not be able to get pregnant anymore. And so pregnancy is not a concern, but there's no such thing as being too old for an STI. So you have to protect yourself all the time. Be open and honest when it comes to the intimacy. Safe intimacy means sexual intimacy, but it also means opening up about who you are and being intimate on that level, being vulnerable and transparent. Couple more. One is to protect your finances. You want to maintain financial independence. Okay, and so some people like to keep separate bank accounts. That's okay if it works for you. And certainly if you're in a relationship, that's the best thing to do. Don't start merging your money too soon. And try not to lend money to someone, because if you're in a relationship and they are having to borrow money from you, they're not going through a financially stable period in time. And so that should be self-evident lots of times, but it isn't. And I know of at least two beautiful, intelligent, well-educated women who loaned money to men that they barely knew as they were dating and talking. In fact, in one case, they had not even met face to face yet. She was talking to him online, and he gave her great stories about what was going on right now. And he didn't come out and ask, she said, but he kind of set the stage that kind of reeled her in. Most people who do think, a scam artist is a professional. They know what they're doing. So she ended up loaning him money once, two or three times, and the total amount was $3,000. Well, later she got ghosted, and of course the loan was never repaid. So don't lend money to people that you barely know. Don't put your bank accounts together. And I don't even think people should like make a purchase of a home together too soon. Many times you'll see that people who are cohabitating buy a place together. And even though there's no guarantee, even when you get married, that you're always going to stay together and not have to divide up those things, at least when you get divorced, there's some legal protection for you. But if you're in a situationship, or even if it's something more serious than that, and you're in a committed partnership relationship, if they can't hold up their end early on, you could be setting yourself up for a lifetime of carrying the financial load. And if you're going into joint ventures together, the laws are not like there's not a divorce court for people who chose to live together for the last 10 years. So dividing up those things isn't as clean as it is if a marriage comes to an end. And then the last one that I will share before we go to our next break is to keep it light early on. You meet somebody, don't try to rush it. You might be tired of being alone, you might be lonely, all kinds of things floating through your heads. But especially on initial dates, the dating experts all say um, avoid having conversations that might scare somebody off. Don't give the long stories about your ex. They don't want to hear that. Don't go on extensively about the grandchildren and pull out all the pictures. Yeah, they're cute, but early on in the relationship, it's not a good thing. Avoid heavy topics. Don't talk in. Now, I know I said that you have to be open and honest and intimate with them so that they understand some of the health things, but you might not want to give them the deep, dark health scares all up front. Early on, you want to focus on things that are a lot lighter, like hobbies that you enjoy. What kind of music do you like? Your favorite vacation spot? Who's your favorite author? What are your favorite foods? Those kinds of things. You might even get into, to bring a little levity into it and learn about one another. Maybe you talk about excluding the person that you're on the date with. What was the best date you've ever had and why? And then maybe you go to the flip side and you say, okay, what was the worst date you ever had and why? And when you talk about those things, you're also learning. I mean, it's not just probably a funny story, but you're also learning because you're finding out what are their turnoffs and turn-ons. When you're hearing the why behind it, when you're getting the full color commentary of what took place, that's when you're learning. So after the date, when you're by yourself, you can go back and reflect on those things that you discussed and what you learned from them. What did that tell me about that individual? How should I approach them? And if whether or not I'm willing to do that. Am I willing to approach them the way they need to be approached in order to be with them? How did the experience make you feel about them and about yourself? And then you need to be strategic. And strategy is not a bad thing. There needs to be strategy in everything that you do. So being strategic means what else do you need to learn? Plan dates and conversations that will help you get the information that you're looking for. So if you need to know, let's say you need to know if they are a spiritual person. You need to know if there's somebody where they stand on faith and religion. Are we well aligned in that area? Then you can plan a date or conversation that will draw from that. So you don't have to just go right in asking questions about it, but just have some conversation. One suggestion before we go to break is apps may not be your thing. So if you're wondering where to meet people, check out event sites like eventbrite.com or meetup.com, because if you focus on the event, then you know that you're going to at least have a good time because it was something that you were interested in. And you're going to have conversation that's conducive to whatever the environment is. So if you're going, let's say you like art and you decide to go to an art show at a museum or something, okay, fine. You might be in a place where you can mix and mingle with people. You could talk about art on the wall. Presumably, they also like art since they're there. They may even like that particular artist since they're there. So talk about that artist, talk about the paintings, those kinds of things. It's a more comfortable, relaxed environment. You can be yourself and you can learn about the person at the same time. And you know that at least you have that topic that drew you to the event. You at least have that in common. And the same thing goes with meetup groups. They form around common interests. So you attend the meeting around whatever it is. There are meetup groups around all kinds of things, hiking, wine lovers, whatever. But go to the event with a purpose. It gives you the opportunity to observe people, and perhaps if it's something like a meetup group where you're going to see them over and over again, you get to know them gradually over time. So when you go to these meetings and events, again, have a strategy. Don't just leave the meeting up to chance. Don't leave meeting people, is what I'm trying to say, up to chance. So for example, if you go to the art gallery, you attend a wine tasting, whatever it might be, as you mingle at the event, maybe go in with 2 or 3 questions that you want to get answered. And so as you're talking to that person, you ask those questions. And if you find that you connect with them on something good, okay, you talk to them a little bit longer. But if not, if they say something that's one of your turnoffs, then what you might have to do is say, I've enjoyed talking to you, but I think I'm going to go and mingle a little bit, see who else I can get to meet. I'm going to go take a look at the art that's in that next room, whatever the case might be, so that you got a nice way out, and then you go find somebody else to ask those same 2 or 3 questions. Again, it's strategy. Strategy is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's the motive that might make it bad. But if you're just trying to get to know people authentically, then yeah, have some strategy so that you don't go to the event, come back home, you didn't enjoy yourself, you didn't meet anybody, nothing happened because you just went in without a strategy. Sound good? All right, over this break, I want you to just write down one must-have and one deal breaker. Think about it. And then after the show, you can always add to your list. But write down one must-have and one deal breaker. And if you feel so inclined, then you can let us know what those things are when we come back. So this is Relationship Conversations. I am Dr. Linda Bing. This is Pittsburgh's DSEN, and we will be right back.
What's up, Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh's DSEN listeners? It's Monday. Let's start the week off right. We have that soulful music to help you. Yes, we have all the soulful sounds, and we hope that you're enjoying it. If so, send us a text at 412-218-3888 to let us know. We're wishing everyone a safe, productive, and a fun week. And of course, keep our sounds on and let someone know about us. We are Pittsburgh's DSEN, the place for soul.
Pittsburgh, it's an old school party. Yes. Each Saturday, we throw it back with some of the best old school music, funk, R&B, old school, rap, hip hop, and all the jams that make you move and dance. Yes, check it out. Each Saturday, right here on Pittsburgh's DSEN, all the old school jams, 6 to 11 p.m.
Pittsburgh, have you seen our Sunday radio schedule? Ooh, it is lit. Start the day off with our Sunday gospel music from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. It will inspire you and have you praising the Lord. Then from 3 to 8 p.m., we bring you Sunday jazz melody for all the jazz lovers. Then cap off the night with the Quiet Storm from 8 to 11 p.m. to hear the best smooth, romantic, and soulful R&B sounds of yesterday and today. All that each Sunday on Pittsburgh's DSEN, the place for soul.
I wanna come home to you and only you. 'Cause making love to just anyone ain't happening. I just gotta be with you. Do you think about us finishing something we started so long ago? I wanna give you my all.
Welcome back. Welcome back. We are almost out of time. The evening is going so fast, but thank you for hanging in there with me. I really appreciate you being here. And if you're just joining, this is Relationship Conversations. I'm Dr. Linda Bain. We're so glad you found us, whether it's directly on our website for Pittsburgh's DSEN, or if you found us on YouTube or one of the many stations that picks up the show, like TuneIn Radio and others. However you found us, I'm glad you're here. So we've been talking a lot about the differences in the generations, how they view marriage, how you go about dating, depending on your generation. Not that all of that is, a must do or that it's written in stone, but just trying to help people who are perhaps looking to change their situation in a way of connecting with someone, not in a way of leaving, but in a way of connecting with someone. So if that's you, hopefully you picked up some nuggets along the way. And so in the time that we have remaining, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, take us kind of back to the Gen X, Gen Z conversation and look at some of their generational perspectives on marriage. So for instance, the Gen Xers, projected to 62 to 82% of them projected that to ever marry. Only 62 to 82% would ever marry. In Gen Z, it was 56 to 58%. So what this is saying is that there are more Gen Xers who think that they'll get married than there are Gen Zs who will. One of the primary drivers, the reason why Gen X people look for marriage is tradition and stability. They grew up believing in marriage. So I asked the question at the onset whether or not marriage was dying. And Gen Xers still believe in marriage. It's a tradition. They think that they should, and they believe that that will help keep them stable. Whereas Gen Z folks, they value alignment and authenticity. So if I'm aligned with you and this feels good and we can be our authentic selves, then maybe we'll get married. But it's not like marriage is a driver for them. And then when it comes to traditional roles, the Gen Xers look at things like duty and responsibility. But the Gen Zs are a little different. Some push for equity, making sure that things are well balanced, and others want to show a rise in traditionalist views. So some of them are looking at whether or not, like I said, they align, that's part of it. And then the other part is whether or not they are traditionalists. Sorry, I'm a little distracted because I know I've got some messages that came in and I am looking to find them. Okay, here we go. So thank you for those of you who are engaging with me. That's the one I read a minute ago. Okay, here's the new one. This is off of YouTube. So this person says, when dating, I think it's important for women to know the difference between a man's interest and his intention and not confuse the two to avoid being taken advantage of. That's some gold right there. That was a great nugget. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm not seeing um, the name that the person is using, but thank you so much for sharing that with us. And there is a big difference between interest and intention. Not everybody who is interested in you is going to have good intentions. And that's where it kind of goes back. Remember, if you were with me in one of the earlier segments, I talked about that thing called breadcrumbing and how people will drop little breadcrumbs. They will be flirtatious, they'll take you out, but they do things sporadically. There's no commitment and there's no consistency or continuity. You never know, like from week to week, are you going to hear from them or not? That's usually someone who is showing interest, but they're still shopping. They have not identified you. Their intentions may not be with you, but they keep you around just in case. You're a placeholder so that when I'm free, when I don't have anything else going on, I can go back to you. And don't allow yourself to get put into that situation because once you get into that box, it'll be hard to get out of that box. Don't waste your time on someone who, there's a saying about, oh, now I'm going to forget it. Don't make someone a priority when they only consider you to be an option. That's what it is. And I think that is so important. Do not make someone a priority when they only consider you to be an option. Somebody who has interest but not good intentions is making you an option. And when they're throwing out the breadcrumbs, it's just to keep you hooked enough that when they choose you, you're willing to be available. You want to go with somebody that makes you a priority. And if you're not a priority to them, then you don't need to make them a priority in your life either. And so that's why so many of the Gen Zers, I don't know that they're any better when it comes to identifying interest versus intention, but they at least are aware, more aware of the differences. And the reason that I say that is because they are the ones that are making sure there's alignment. They're making sure that we're on the same page when it comes to not only how we do life and view life, but what do we want out of this situationship? And they start out with it as a situationship and let it evolve into something more. So thank you so much for that comment. There was a lot of richness in there. You don't want to be taken advantage of. So make sure that you know the difference between interest and intention. If you are just of interest, now granted, in the first week or two, it takes a little while, but you're spending time with this person and you're well aware of their interest, but you don't see intention. Don't let yourself get caught up into that trap. So thank you for that. All right, I've got all kinds of good information for you. Let's see, what am I going to share with you in the last bits of our conversation? So many good things to talk about. Let's talk about, nah, okay, so here's some information that I pulled together on, there's a lot of research that goes into this. There are a lot of things that I just know from experience, from book training, from off the top of my head. But when I'm coming to you, I want to make sure that everything I'm giving you is on point. So I do a lot of research, and some of the information doesn't get shared because we just had conversation without it, wasn't enough time. But sometimes I go through the trouble of I do the research, and there are a lot of things that I write down because I want to make sure that I give it to you as is. So what do you tell that Gen Zer who's trying to figure it all out? For a Gen Z person that's navigating dating and marriage, the best approach is to treat dating and marriage as choices rather than requirements. Gen Xers, remember I said that they view it as it's tradition and it's a duty, it brings stability. Gen Z doesn't look at it that way. So you have the freedom and the responsibility to define what success and a successful life looks like for you. So here's some ways, some practical ways to frame your approach. You want to focus on relational health. Don't get hung up on the timeline. Don't say, I want to be married by the time I'm 30, or, don't feel like, oh, my biological clock is ticking. I have to find someone so I can have some children very soon. Don't get hung up on the timeline. Instead, focus on developing a relationship that is healthy. And it becomes healthy by you having good relationship skills. So that would be things like good, open, and honest communication, being authentic, setting boundaries and protecting those boundaries, having emotional intelligence, considering others and their feelings as you make decisions. Those skills are an important part of making sure that you have a quality life, but also that you have a quality relationship. So focus on the health. Don't get thrown off by the timing. And please don't get thrown off by what other people are doing. All of my friends are married. Okay, good for them. You have no idea how happy they are. You don't know if the marriage is going to last. You want to find one that is happy and lasting. View marriage as a capstone, not a foundation. What does that mean? So a capstone is something, it signifies, it's a sign that you reached a certain status or a certain level of stability. It's something to celebrate. It's like the icing on the cake. I made it. So if marriage is a capstone, then it's something to aspire to. In the past, people got married to start their lives together. That was sort of the culmination. The goal was to get married, and that's what young ladies were raised and socialized to do. So it was almost like that was the foundation. This is when your life begins. Now, the most successful modern marriages are viewed as capstones, something that you do hopefully once and only once, and you do it when you're financially stable and you're secure in your own identity. So build yourself first. I mean, that's the best advice. Build yourself first, get your career, make sure that your mental health is in order. Your finances are in a place where you feel like a whole person rather than looking for a partner to complete you. You don't want to be completed by someone. You want to be a whole person hooking up with another whole person, so that when the two of you come together in marriage, you have something that's whole and solid. All right, Rick in Philly. What do you believe are the top ways to meet someone? Wow. Thank you, Rick, for engaging with me. The top ways, I'm not sure if you're asking about the most common as being the top or the best ways. And that's what you're talking about. I'm going to guess that you're talking about the best ways to meet someone. And so from my perspective, the best ways to meet someone kind of depend on your personality to some extent. If you are someone who is really into taking it slow and the technology of things, then you might be okay with meeting people on dating apps as long as you remember some key things about those apps. Remember that, first of all, people are not necessarily being themselves. So you have to take that into consideration. The information that you're getting needs to be vetted. And you feel this sense of connection because people are talking about things that you like and so forth. But until you really get into somebody's personal space and feel the kind of energy that they give, you really don't know that person. So you can use the apps, but use them sparingly. And I would say don't use the apps because you want volume, because as was mentioned earlier, you might have, high volume but low quality. So you don't want to use the apps for volume. But if you're somebody that maybe is more introverted, if you're someone that wants to do a lot of talking first, some people get on the apps and they um, text on those apps before they even get to a place of doing some sort of video conversation. Definitely you want to have a video conversation because you want to make sure that the person you're talking to really is the person that you think you're talking to. So some people want to do some of the texting, then they might talk on the phone, then they might do some kind of FaceTime or video conversation, and then they might actually meet in person. But they've been gathering information all along the way. There have been checkpoints. And once you pass, for lack of a better word, a certain level, now you go to the next level. So if that fits your personality because you're kind of introverted, it is a relatively safe, easy way to maintain some of your anonymity, but still put yourself out there. Now, if you are more of a high energy person and you don't necessarily need to take it slow, if you are someone who is more in tune with feeling the energy of someone, then like I was saying earlier, if you find activities that you like to do, so that when you go to the activity, whether it's an art gallery, a wine tasting, you join a hiking club, a bowling league, whatever the case might be. Find something that you enjoy. And if you enjoy it, then at least when you get there are two things. One is you will probably have a good time because you're doing something you enjoy. So even if you don't meet anyone that particular time, it wasn't a waste because you had a good time. The second thing that comes out of that is you would at least have that thing in common with that person. Back in the day when black ski clubs were really popular, a lot of people used to go to those not because they were excellent at skiing, but they went because it was a place to meet other people. And if you did ski, you could ski together, you could meet back for some hot chocolate together. There was something, some common activity that you could work around. So you have to find whatever that common activity is for you and be strategic when you go. Make sure that you're going to tell yourself in advance. Here are the things that remind yourself. Here are the things that are must-haves for me. Here are the things that are deal breakers. I'm going to go tonight and it's an art gallery. So I'm going to find a painting and I'm going to find somebody that I ask, give me an opinion on this. What do you see in this? What energy do you get? Make it all about the activity and where you are, not about you or about them. So if you're more outgoing, go out to places. I would try to avoid some of the places where people are interested in just hooking up. Uh, but, excuse me, having said that, that doesn't mean that you don't go to, you know, your favorite bar or something like that if that's what you're into. I think going to like networking events are always good because usually the people that you meet are going to be professionals. And so you can hope that they're going to conduct themselves in a professional manner. You might have some professional things to talk to them about. So I would suggest that you keep an open mind wherever you go. You can meet, Mr. or Miss Right in the supermarket, but make sure that wherever you go, you are cognizant of your boundaries. What are your must-haves? What are your deal breakers? Go someplace where you can enjoy the activity and the vibe that's taking place. Don't be pushy. Don't be overly shy. I don't think that there's any place that is better than some other place. I just think it depends on your personality and what are the things that you like to do. So thank you, Rick. First of all, I appreciate you for listening. And secondly, thank you for engaging. All right. Well, on this list that I'm actually scrolling through tonight, I don't always have lists, but tonight I do. This one lines up with what I was just saying. This says be radically intentional. So because dating apps have created choice overload, I mean, they're just all of these people out there, many Gen Zers fall into the situationships or the passive dating. When you have so many options at your disposal, it makes it harder to choose. So that's why you have to know your must-haves and your deal breakers so you can find what you want instead of just accepting what you find. If you do want marriage, not everybody does. That's okay. But if you do want marriage or a serious partnership, be upfront. You don't say it on the first conversation, hey, I'm looking for a husband. No. Or I'm looking for a woman that I can spend the rest of my life with. Some people use things like that. It's become a cliche, a pickup line. If the guy thinks that what you want is a husband, he's going to tell you some of that stuff just to get your interest. So you want to make sure that you are being upfront with what your intentions are. Don't mislead people into thinking that maybe you're looking for something that you're not. And then don't hide your long-term goals either. If you appear to be too chill, then that could be just as much of a turn off for somebody who isn't that chill. So you just have to be yourself and be clear about what you want, because you're going to filter out the people who aren't on the list of things that you're looking for. It saves you from wasting time and energy. So it's better to take longer to get your needs met than to rush in, get your needs met, but then end up unhappy. Separate the wedding from the marriage. That's an important one. Gen Zers often say that one of the reasons that they don't rush to marriage is because it's too expensive. They say weddings are too expensive. Well, a wedding doesn't have to be expensive, but if you value the legal and the emotional commitment of marriage, but you hate all of the commercialism around it, then don't do a big wedding, but you can still have that legal and emotional commitment of marriage. And, a courthouse wedding, which costs you all of maybe 50, $100, that can be just as satisfying if you're okay with that. So don't let the wedding be the driver. Don't let it stop you from connecting with someone because you feel like, well, I can't afford a wedding. You don't have to have a wedding. Or, if you're with the right person, maybe the two of you can talk through, how do we compromise? Because if she wants a wedding and the two of you can't afford the wedding, then maybe you talk about, what's the compromise? How do we get something that we both want out of this, starting our lives together? And then own your own path is an important one. So even if you live in a world where being single and unmarried is the norm, not the exception, follow your own path. What do you want? Don't let tradition dictate to you what you need to do. Don't let your parents put pressure on you about, when am I going to get some grandkids? What do you want out of life? You have to know yourself, your wants, your desires, your values, and stick to those things. Don't let anybody take you off of it. So I guess the advice in that area is, if you choose to marry, do it because you believe it adds value to your life, not because you're afraid of being alone. And if you choose to stay single, do it because you love your independence, not because you're afraid of commitment. The motivation is really what's the important thing with respect to most things in life. Because even if you do the right thing for the wrong reason, that's still the wrong thing. You've got to have good motives. Understand why. Why am I doing this? What do I hope to gain from this? What do I hope to contribute by doing this? Those are the kinds of questions that you need to be asking yourself when you enter into anything. But, we're talking about dating and relationships and marriage. So make sure that you're entering into those things for all of the right reasons. I already mentioned to you to make sure that you're finding a whole partner to share life with. Don't just say, well, I'm lonely, I need to find somebody. And don't get hung up on, I've got to find that perfect soulmate. There's no such thing. We don't have soulmates. There isn't somebody out there who is your designated person to be with. There are people who have qualities, and more than one person has the qualities that you might desire. So just like someone can be married, let's say they marry someone, their spouse passes away, they remarry, and they can be happy in both of those marriages, it's because there is no soulmate. They found the qualities in the people that they were looking for. So just remember some of the things about, independence and baggage. Remember to unpack your bags, the finances, the communication. Build up your skills, your relationship skills. Learn how to communicate, learn how to compromise, learn how to prioritize. All of those things are so important. So we started out with the question of, is marriage outdated? I don't know if the conversation led you to an opinion or perhaps changed your opinion, but I do think that you need to consider what marriage means to you. For some people, it's a spiritual commitment. For some people, having a sexually intimate relationship outside of marriage is not an option. Even in that case, if you feel like I have to be married, okay, still take your time and find the person, a right person for you. There's more than one, but find someone who fits well. Be authentic, make sure that you're aligned on all the important things. So marriage isn't outdated, in my opinion, but for some people, it is being redefined. No matter what generation you're a part of, be led by your needs, your wants, your values, those kinds of things, not by what's popular or what's trending. And if you are dating someone from a different generation, it's important for you both to understand some of the generational experiences that might be influencing your partner and the decisions that he or she makes. You both have to keep an open mind and be willing to make some adjustments. There's no one out there who is going to be the perfect person for you, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a perfectly happy relationship. So it's time to say see you later, not goodbye, but until next time. But I've got to remind you of some important things. So check out Soul Take, Pittsburgh's exciting sports talk show. There's so much going on in the world of sports in Pittsburgh. Who will the Steelers draft? The things going on with the Penguins. The fellas are going to break it all down. each position and talk about the key players in the draft. So if you're excited about who the Steelers would draft, listen in. Tune in to Soul Take on Tuesday from 6 to 8. Also, they'll be talking about the Penguins playoff games, the Pirates, the NBA playoff games, and so much more. So if you're interested in sports, or maybe you just want to learn more about sports, by all means, tune into Soul Take to check out what's going on in the world of Pittsburgh sports. And I want to remind you of the cruise. So remember that Pittsburgh's DSEN will be sailing the Eastern Caribbean for 7 nights, November 7th to the 14th, leaving out of Miami and making stops in St. Martin, St. Thomas, and the Bahamas. 3 beautiful countries, islands. I've been to all of them. Great time. Details are on the website, so go to pghdsen.com and check out the details. And right now, I want you to keep it locked right here, because as soon as I sign off, you will be entering into the best of soulful music, which goes on from now until midnight. As always, family, it has been my pleasure to spend some time with you. I hope it was enjoyable and informative for you. Thank you so much for listening to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing on Pittsburgh's DSEN. And as I say, see you later until next week. I want you to keep learning, keep growing, and keep loving. One love.
You've been listening to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing. Continue to listen to Pittsburgh's DSEN. We're on 24/7. See our radio schedule for programming details, and please remember to subscribe to receive updated information.